"I'll do any work," the Apache woman begged. But the cowboy's offer shocked her. She stood at the edge of the dusty ranch road, her boots worn thin and her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. The sun was already sinking, painting the sky in soft orange and gold, but the day's heat still clung to the ground. Her name did not matter to the people who passed her. To them, she was just another Apache woman asking for work, another face they had learned to ignore. She had walked since morning. Her legs ached, her mouth was dry, and her stomach had been empty for hours. Still, she kept going. Turning back was not an option. Behind her was hunger, cold nights, and children waiting for food that did not exist. Ahead of her was one last ranch, the biggest one in the area. If this door closed too, she did not know what she would do. The ranch gate stood tall and wide. Cattle moved slowly in the fields beyond, their bells making soft sounds in the quiet evening. The land looked strong and alive, unlike her own situation. She hesitated before stepping forward. She had been turned away many times already. Some ranchers did not even let her finish speaking. Others looked at her clothes, her skin, her name, and shook their heads before she could ask. She tightened her grip on the small cloth bag she carried. Inside were a few personal things and nothing more. Her heart beat faster as she walked through the open gate. Each step felt heavy, not because of her tired body, but because of the fear she carried. Asking for help had become the hardest thing she had ever done. A man stood near the barn, repairing a broken fence. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed like someone who belonged to the land. His hat shaded his face, but she could tell he was older than most of the men she had spoken to before. His movements were slow but strong, like someone who had worked hard all his life. She stopped a few steps away, unsure how to begin. He noticed her presence and straightened up, resting his hands on the fence. He did not reach for anything, did not shout, did not tell her to leave. He simply watched her, calm and quiet. She swallowed and forced herself to speak. "Sir," she said softly. Her voice was rough from lack of water and long days of silence. "I'm looking for work." The cowboy studied her face. He saw the tired eyes, the dust on her clothes, and the way she stood with her shoulders slightly hunched, as if expecting a blow that never came. He had seen many people pass through his land over the years, but something about her made him pause. "What kind of work?" he asked. She took a deep breath. This was the moment that usually ended everything. "Any work," she said. "I can clean, cook, tend animals, carry water. I'll do anything." The words tasted bitter in her mouth. She had grown up learning the value of pride and self-respect. Her people taught her to stand tall, to work hard, and to never beg. But hunger had a way of breaking even the strongest rules. When children cried at night, pride became a luxury she could no longer afford. The cowboy did not answer right away. He leaned against the fence and looked past her for a moment, toward the open land. He had heard those words before, but rarely spoken with such quiet strength. Most people who begged did so loudly, desperately, trying to convince him. She did not try to sell herself. She simply stated the truth. She waited, her hands trembling slightly. Her mind raced with memories of rejection. One rancher had laughed. Another had told her to leave before nightfall. One woman had slammed a door in her face. Each memory pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. "I can work hard," she added quickly, afraid her silence would be taken as weakness. "I won't cause trouble, I just need a chance." The cowboy's eyes returned to her. There was no anger in them, no pity either. Just thoughtfulness. He asked, "You got family?" She nodded. "Children." That single word carried more weight than a long explanation. The cowboy understood. He had grown up poor himself, working land that barely gave back what it took. He knew what it meant to worry about mouths to feed. Still, he had reasons to be careful. Hiring someone was not just about work. It meant responsibility. It meant dealing with neighbors who liked to talk, judge, and interfere. Taking in an Apache woman would not go unnoticed. People would have opinions and not kind ones. She could see hesitation in his posture. Her heart sank. She had seen that look too many times. It was the look of someone weighing comfort against conscience. "I don't need much," she said quietly. "Just fair pay. Enough to buy food." The cowboy noticed how she said fair, not more. That mattered to him. He straightened fully now and removed his hat, wiping sweat from his brow. Up close, she could see lines on his face carved by sun and years. He was not a cruel man, but neither was he soft. "You're not afraid of hard work?" he asked. She almost smiled at that, though her lips barely moved. "I've known hard work all my life." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the ranch filled the silence. Cattle lowing, wind moving through dry grass, wood creaking under the weight of age. Time seemed to slow, as if the land itself was waiting to hear his answer. In her mind, she prepared herself for another refusal. She told herself she would thank him politely and leave with dignity. She would walk until dark if she had to. She would find another place, another door, even if hope was fading. The cowboy finally spoke. "You look tired," he said. "When was the last time you ate?" She hesitated, embarrassed. Then she answered honestly, "Yesterday morning." That was enough for him to make a decision, though she did not know it yet. He had seen hunger before, and he knew its face. It was not loud. It was quiet, patient, and dangerous. "Come sit," he said, pointing toward a small bench near the barn. "I need to think." Her legs almost gave out with relief. He had not sent her away. Not yet. She walked to the bench and sat carefully, keeping her hands folded in her lap. She did not want to appear ungrateful or demanding. The cowboy walked toward the house, then stopped and looked back at her. "You wait here," he said. "I'll be back." She nodded quickly. As he walked away, she let out a slow breath she did not realize she had been holding. Her heart still raced, but now there was a small spark of hope burning inside her chest. It was fragile, but it was there. While she waited, memories filled her mind. Her village. Her parents teaching her how to work the land. Her children's faces, thin but brave. She thought about how she had promised them she would return with something, anything. She prayed silently that she would not break that promise. The cowboy returned after a few minutes, carrying a tin cup of water. He handed it to her without a word. She accepted it with both hands, nodding her thanks, and drank slowly. The cool water brought her back to life. As she lowered the cup, she looked up at him, unsure of what would come next. She expected instructions, maybe a short-term job, maybe a warning. What she did not expect was the calm seriousness in his voice when he said, "Before we talk about work, I want you to know something." Her grip tightened on the cup. "I don't believe in treating people like tools," he continued. "If you work here, you work with respect." Her eyes widened slightly. No one had spoken to her like that in a long time. She nodded again, afraid to interrupt. He looked at her closely now, not as someone begging, but as someone standing at a turning point. "I haven't decided yet," he said honestly, "but I'm listening." Those words alone felt like a gift. She set the cup down carefully and met his eyes. For the first time that day, she stood a little straighter. "I'll prove myself," she said, "if you let me." The cowboy did not answer right away. He looked toward the horizon, where the sun was nearly gone. Whatever decision he was about to make would change more than just one evening. It would change lives in ways neither of them could yet imagine. And as the first stars appeared in the sky, the Apache woman sat on that bench, waiting for an answer that would soon shock her. Not because it was harsh, but because it was something she had never been offered before. The night settled quietly over the ranch after the cowboy walked back toward the house. The Apache woman remained on the bench, listening to the sounds around her. Crickets sang in the grass, and the cattle shifted slowly in the fields. The land felt alive, steady, and calm, very different from the restless fear that had followed her for weeks. Even though she still did not know his decision, something about the way he had spoken to her made this place feel different. She wrapped her shawl tighter as the air cooled. Her body was tired beyond words, but her mind would not rest. As she waited, Memories rose one by one, memories she usually tried to push away. They came now because she had nothing else to do but wait and remember. She thought of the first time she had asked for work after leaving her home. She had stood outside a small store, hands shaking, practicing her words in her head. When she finally spoke, the man behind the counter barely looked at her. He said there was nothing available and turned his back. She remembered how small she had felt walking away, how the ground seemed to pull her down with every step. At another ranch, the owner had listened for a moment, then told her she would only bring trouble. He said neighbors would talk. He said it was better if she left before someone complained. She had wanted to argue, to say she was not trouble, that she only wanted honest work. But the words stayed locked in her chest. She left quietly, the way she always did. These moments had built up inside her like stones, each one adding weight. Over time, she learned not to expect kindness. She learned to keep her eyes lowered and her voice calm. She learned that silence often protected her better than anger ever could. The bench creaked as she shifted her position. She wondered what the cowboy was thinking now. Maybe he was inside, talking himself out of helping her. Maybe he was remembering warnings from neighbors or past problems. She would not blame him if he chose the easier path. Everyone did, sooner or later. As she sat there, she remembered her parents. Her father had taught her that work was more than survival. It was dignity. When you work, he used to say, you stand equal to anyone. Her mother had taught her patience and strength, lessons learned from years of hardship. They had raised her to believe she had value, even when the world tried to tell her otherwise. Those lessons had kept her going when everything else felt lost. Even now, sitting alone on a stranger's ranch, she held onto them tightly. She was not asking for pity. She was asking for a chance. Inside the house, the cowboy sat at a small wooden table, staring at nothing in particular. A simple meal sat untouched in front of him. His thoughts were far from food. He kept seeing her face, the tired eyes that still held resolve. He had met many people who wanted work, but few who carried themselves the way she did. He thought about his own past, about growing up on land that demanded everything from you. He remembered his father teaching him to judge a person by effort, not by background. A good worker is a good worker, his father had said. Everything else is noise. But the noise was loud now. He knew what people would say if he hired her. He knew some neighbors would not understand. They would question his judgment. They might stop doing business with him. Life on the land was already hard enough without added pressure. Still, something inside him would not let the thought go. He thought about the way she said she would do any work, not as a plea but as a fact. He thought about the word fair she had used. He thought about the children she had mentioned, and how she had not used them to beg, only to explain. He pushed his plate aside and stood up. He walked to the window and looked out toward the barn. He could just make out her shape on the bench, sitting straight despite her exhaustion. She had not wandered, had not tried to sneak closer to the house. She was waiting, exactly as he had asked. That mattered to him. He grabbed a lantern and stepped outside. The night air was cool and smelled of earth and animals. As he walked toward her, he noticed how she stood immediately when she saw him approach, as if afraid sitting too long might be seen as disrespect. "You don't have to stand," he said gently. She nodded and sat back down, hands folded again. The lantern light showed the lines of fatigue on her face more clearly now. She looked older than she likely was, worn down by worry and long days. "I want to understand something," he said, lowering himself onto a nearby crate. "Where did you come from?" She hesitated, then answered simply. She spoke of moving from place to place, of temporary work that ended too soon, of being judged before she could prove herself. She did not speak with anger. Her voice was calm, almost flat, as if she had told this story many times before. He listened without interrupting. Each word added to the picture forming in his mind. This was not someone looking for an easy way out. This was someone who had been fighting quietly for a long time. "You ever worked on a ranch before?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "Years ago I learned quickly." He nodded. "Why leave?" Her gaze dropped to the ground. "The work ended, then the doors closed." He understood. Jobs ended, opportunities disappeared. For some people, new ones appeared easily. For others, they did not. They sat in silence again, but this time it felt different. It was not an empty silence filled with fear. It was thoughtful, heavy with meaning. He finally spoke. "I won't lie to you, hiring you won't be simple." She looked up, bracing herself. "People talk," he continued. "They always do." "I know," she said quietly. "But," he added, holding up a hand, "I don't make decisions to please people who don't do the work." Her breath caught slightly, though she did her best not to show it. He leaned forward. "If I give you a chance, I expect honesty, effort, and respect, same as anyone else." She met his eyes. "You'll have that." He studied her for a moment longer, then nodded once. "Tomorrow morning I'll show you around, we'll see how you do." For a second she did not move. The words took time to sink in. Tomorrow morning. Not a short task, not a single favor, a real chance. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't thank me yet," he replied. "Earn it." She nodded again, but this time there was something new in her expression. Not relief alone, but determination. He stood up and motioned toward a small building near the barn. "You can sleep there tonight. It's simple, but it's dry and warm." Her eyes widened. "That's more than enough." He handed her the lantern. "Get some rest. We start early." As he walked back toward the house, she remained seated for a moment, letting the reality settle in. She was not being sent away. She was not being ignored. For the first time in a long while, someone had looked past her situation and seen her effort. Inside the small building, she sat on the narrow bed and finally allowed herself to breathe deeply. The room smelled of hay and clean wood. It was not luxury, but it felt safe. She lay back and stared at the ceiling, her body heavy with exhaustion. Tears came then, quiet and steady, not tears of sadness but of release. She thought of her children and imagined telling them she had found work, a place that offered more than just survival. She whispered a promise into the still air, promising she would not waste this chance. Outside, the ranch settled into sleep. The cowboy lay awake longer than usual, listening to the night. He knew the choice he had made would bring challenges, but deep down he felt certain of one thing: he had chosen to listen. And sometimes that was the beginning of everything. Morning arrived slowly on the ranch, carried in by a pale sky and the soft sound of animals waking. The Apache woman opened her eyes before the sun fully rose. She lay still for a moment, listening. The night had passed without fear, without the need to keep one eye open. That alone felt like a gift. She sat up on the narrow bed and rubbed her hands together to warm them. The small room was quiet and clean, just as the cowboy had promised. She folded her blanket neatly, the way her mother had taught her long ago. If this was truly the start of something new, she wanted to show respect in every small way. Outside, the ranch was already moving. She could hear boots on dirt, the low calls of cattle, and the creak of gates opening. She stepped out into the cool air, the early light touching the land gently. For a moment, she simply stood there, taking it all in. This place felt different from the others, not easier, but honest. The cowboy spotted her near the barn and nodded once. "You're up early," he said. "I'm used to it," she replied. "Good," he said. "Follow me." He did not waste time with long explanations. He showed her the water pump, the feed storage, and the tool shed. As they walked, he spoke plainly, pointing out what needed to be done and what could wait. He did not talk down to her. He spoke the same way he would to anyone else working the land. She listened carefully, committing every detail to memory. This was her chance, and she treated it like something fragile that could break if handled carelessly. Her first task was simple but tiring, carrying water to the animals and cleaning the stalls. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work without hesitation. The work was heavy and her arms burned quickly, but she did not slow down. Each step, each lift felt like proof that she belonged here. Other workers began to notice her as the morning went on. Some watched silently, others whispered to each other. A few looked openly unsure. She felt their eyes on her back but kept her focus on the task in front of her. She had learned long ago that answering doubt with effort spoke louder than words. One of the younger ranch hands approached her while she was working. "You ever done this before?" he asked. "Yes," she answered, not stopping. He nodded, impressed despite himself. "You work fast." She gave a small smile and continued. That was enough. The cowboy observed from a distance. He did not hover or interfere. He wanted to see how she handled herself when no one was watching closely. What he saw eased something inside him. She worked steadily, carefully, and without complaint. When a task was done, she looked for the next one instead of waiting to be told. By midday, the sun was high and strong. Sweat ran down her face and her muscles ached, but she did not slow. When the cowboy called for a break, she stopped immediately, wiping her hands on a cloth. "You can eat," he said, nodding toward a shaded area. She hesitated. "After the animals." "They're fine," he replied. "You won't do good work if you don't take care of yourself." She nodded and sat down, accepting the food offered without embarrassment. As she ate, she realized something important. No one was watching her like she might steal it. No one made her feel like she needed to earn every bite twice. It was a small thing, but it mattered more than she expected. As the day went on, the work changed. She helped mend a fence, learning the land's weak points. She gathered supplies, cleaned tools, and followed instructions carefully. When she made a small mistake, she corrected it without excuses. When she was unsure, she asked. The cowboy noticed all of it. Late in the afternoon, he called her over. She walked toward him, her heart beating faster. This moment felt important. "You've done well today," he said. "Thank you," she replied. He nodded. "There's something we need to talk about." She braced herself again, the familiar tightness returning to her chest. Praise often came before disappointment. She waited quietly. "I don't believe in half measures," he continued. "If you're going to work here, you'll work like anyone else. That means regular pay, regular hours, and a place that's yours while you're here." Her eyes widened slightly. She had expected daily work at best, maybe something temporary. This was more than she had imagined. "There's a small house near the far fence," he said. "It's empty, needs cleaning, but it's solid. You can stay there." For a moment she could not speak. A house, not a corner, not a shared space, something with a door she could close at night. Her voice caught. She cleared her throat. "Are you sure?" "I am," he said simply. "You'll earn it like anyone else." She nodded, overwhelmed. "I won't disappoint you." "I don't expect perfection," he replied. "Just honesty." Word spread quickly. By the next day, neighbors began to notice her presence. Some came by under the excuse of business, their curiosity clear. They watched her work, watched how the cowboy treated her. A few offered polite nods, others said nothing at all. One man pulled the cowboy aside. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "People are talking." "I know," the cowboy replied. "It could cost you," the man warned. "It already has," the cowboy said, looking toward the field where she worked. "And I'm still standing." The Apache woman felt the change in the air, even if no one spoke openly to her. Tasks that once felt simple now carried weight. Every mistake felt like it would confirm every doubt. But instead of shrinking under the pressure, she focused harder. She worked earlier, stayed later, and learned faster. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she finished repairing a gate just as the cowboy approached. "You didn't have to stay late," he said. "I wanted to finish it," she replied. He tested the gate, nodding. "Good work." They stood there for a moment, watching the sky change colors. The land looked peaceful, but both knew the calm would not last forever. Challenges were already forming, quiet but certain. "There will be days when this isn't easy," he said. She nodded. "I know. People will test you," he added. "Not always kindly." She met his gaze. "I've been tested before." He studied her face, seeing not just strength but endurance. That mattered more. That night in the small house by the fence, she lit a lamp and cleaned the space carefully. She imagined her children there someday, safe and warm. She imagined a future that did not depend on luck alone but on work and trust. As she lay down to sleep, her body sore but her spirit steady, she knew something important had happened. The offer the cowboy made was more than a job. It was a statement, a risk. One that would soon be tested by forces neither of them could fully control. Outside, the ranch settled into another quiet night. And somewhere beyond the fence, eyes watched, opinions formed, and the true weight of the cowboy's decision began to take shape. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of the ranch slowly became part of her life. Each morning, the Apache woman woke before sunrise, washed her face with cool water, and stepped outside to greet the quiet land. The small house near the fence no longer felt strange. It smelled of clean wood and fresh air. It felt like a place where effort mattered. She worked hard every day, not because she feared losing her place, but because work had always been her way forward. She learned the patterns of the land, the moods of the animals, and the unspoken rules of ranch life. She learned which fences needed extra care after storms, and which cattle were likely to wander. Her hands grew rougher, but her movements became sure and confident. Some of the ranch hands slowly accepted her presence. They began to greet her in the mornings, sometimes asking for help without thinking twice. Others kept their distance. They watched closely, waiting for her to fail, waiting for proof that the cowboy's decision was a mistake. She felt their doubt like a weight on her shoulders, but she did not let it bend her back. One afternoon, a supply wagon arrived from town. The driver spoke loudly, making sure his words carried. He questioned why she was there and whether she belonged. The ranch grew quiet as people listened. The moment felt sharp and uncomfortable. Before she could speak, the cowboy stepped forward. His voice was calm but firm. He said she worked here, earned her pay, and deserved the same respect as anyone else. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He simply stated the truth. The wagon driver muttered something and changed the subject. The tension faded, but the moment stayed with her. She realized then that the cowboy was not only giving her work. He was standing beside her when it mattered. That night she sat alone on the steps of her small house, looking up at the stars. She thought about how rare that kind of support was. Trust, she knew, was not built in words. It was built in moments like these. Not all days were steady. Some were hard in ways she did not expect. There were times when supplies ran low, when storms damaged fences, when animals grew restless. There were days when her body ached so deeply she wondered how much longer she could keep going. But she kept going anyway. One morning she overheard two workers arguing near the barn. They spoke about her, about how things had changed since she arrived. One said the ranch felt different now, more careful, more watched. The other said change was not always bad. She walked past them without stopping, pretending not to hear. Still, their words followed her throughout the day. That evening, the cowboy asked her to join him for a short walk along the fence line. They walked slowly, the ground soft beneath their boots. "You've noticed things," he said. "Yes," she replied. "People don't always like change," he continued, "especially when it forces them to look at themselves." She nodded. "I don't want to cause problems." He stopped walking and looked at her. "You're not the problem." His words settled something inside her. She realized then that he understood more than he often said. As weeks passed, her confidence grew. She began offering ideas when she saw better ways to do things. She spoke up when something felt unsafe. The cowboy listened, sometimes agreeing, sometimes explaining why things were done a certain way. There was respect in these conversations, quiet but strong. Then came the day that tested everything. A group of neighbors arrived unexpectedly, claiming they needed to discuss land boundaries. Their tone was polite, but their eyes were sharp. They asked questions that had nothing to do with fences or land. They spoke about tradition, about how things had always been done. The Apache woman stayed in the background, focused on her task, but she could feel the tension rising. At one point, one of the men glanced at her and shook his head. "This won't end well," he said softly, but loud enough to be heard. The cowboy did not respond immediately. He listened to their concerns, then answered calmly. He said his ranch was his responsibility. He said he chose his workers based on effort, not opinions. He said anyone who had a problem with that could take their business elsewhere. Silence followed. The neighbors exchanged looks. They did not argue further. They left soon after, their visit unfinished. When they were gone, the ranch felt quieter than usual. The Apache woman finished her work with steady hands, but her heart felt heavy. She worried that his stand would bring consequences he did not deserve. That evening, she approached him carefully. "I don't want to be the reason you lose anything," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. "You didn't take anything from me," he replied. "You added to this place." Her eyes filled with tears she did not let fall. She nodded and returned to her work, carrying his words with her. The days after were tense. Some neighbors stopped visiting. Supplies took longer to arrive. The ranch felt watched. But it did not fall apart. Work continued. Animals were fed. Fences held. The Apache woman worked harder than ever, not out of fear but out of loyalty. She knew what it cost him to stand by his decision. She would not let his trust be wasted. One afternoon, a young ranch hand injured his arm while working. Without hesitation, she stepped in, taking over his tasks and helping him steady himself. Her calm presence kept the situation from growing worse. The cowboy noticed how naturally she took charge, how others followed her lead without question. Later, he thanked her. "You handled that well," he said. She shrugged slightly. "We look out for each other." That simple sentence marked another change. The ranch was no longer divided into those who belonged and those who did not. It was becoming something else, a place where effort created belonging. As the season shifted, the land responded. Grass grew thicker. Animals settled. The ranch felt stronger, not weaker, despite the doubts surrounding it. One night, as a storm rolled in, heavy winds shook the fences. Without being told, she joined the others in securing the land. Rain soaked her clothes, but she did not stop. Side by side, they worked until the storm passed. When it was over, they stood together in the quiet that followed. No one spoke. They did not need to. Later, alone in her small house, she realized something important. She was no longer just surviving. She was building something. Trust, stability, a future shaped by work and courage. But she also knew that the biggest test had not yet come. Change never went unchallenged for long. Somewhere beyond the ranch, resentment was growing, and it would soon demand an answer. As she lay down to rest, listening to the wind settle outside, she understood that whatever came next would decide more than her place on the ranch. It would decide whether fairness could truly stand its ground. And when morning came, it would bring with it the final turning point, one that neither she nor the cowboy could avoid. The final turning point did not arrive with noise or sudden drama. It came quietly, the way most real changes do, carried in by ordinary days and difficult choices. The morning began like any other. The Apache woman rose before sunrise, dressed, and stepped outside. The land felt different, though she could not explain why. The air was still heavy, as if the world was holding its breath. She went about her work with care, feeding the animals and checking the fences, her thoughts calm but alert. By mid-morning, word reached the ranch that a meeting was happening in town. Several neighbors had gathered to discuss trade routes, supplies, and shared concerns. It was the kind of meeting the cowboy usually attended, even if he did not enjoy them. This time, the reason was clear. The ranch and the choices made there were the unspoken topic. Before leaving, the cowboy spoke with her near the barn. "I'll be gone most of the day," he said. "Keep things running like usual," she nodded. "Everything will be done." He hesitated, then added, "No matter what you hear, remember this place stands because of work, not talk." She met his eyes. "I understand." As he rode away, she felt a quiet sense of responsibility settle over her. This ranch was no longer just a place she worked. It was something she helped hold together. The day unfolded steadily. She guided the other workers, checked supplies, and kept everyone focused. When questions arose, she answered calmly. When doubts surfaced, she reminded them of tasks that needed attention. By the afternoon, even those who once doubted her followed her lead without hesitation. In town, the meeting grew tense. Some neighbors spoke openly now, no longer hiding behind polite words. They warned of lost business, of broken traditions, of risks that came with change. The cowboy listened without interrupting, his expression steady. When it was his turn to speak, he did not defend himself with anger. He spoke simply. He said the ranch was stronger than before. He said work was being done honestly and well. He said he would not undo fairness just to make others comfortable. A few voices softened. Others did not. By the time the meeting ended, nothing was fully resolved. But one thing was clear. The cowboy would not be moved. Back at the ranch, clouds gathered in the distance. The Apache woman noticed them while repairing a fence. She finished the task quickly, knowing weather could change plans fast. When the first drops of rain fell, she directed the others to secure tools and shelter animals. The rain grew heavier, turning the ground dark and rich. It was not a violent storm, but it demanded attention. Together they worked until everything was safe. When it passed, the land seemed refreshed, the air clean. Late in the evening, the cowboy returned. His horse moved slowly, tired from the long day. The Apache woman approached him as he dismounted. "How did it go?" she asked. He removed his hat and sighed. "About how I expected." She waited. "Some will walk away," he continued. "Some will stay. Either way, this ranch keeps going." She nodded. "We're ready." He looked around, noticing the order, the calm, the way the ranch settled into evening. "I can see that." They walked together toward the barn. For a while, neither spoke. There was nothing left to explain. Over the next weeks, the consequences of that meeting became clear. A few suppliers stopped coming. Some neighbors kept their distance. But others, quietly and without announcement, continued business as usual. The ranch adjusted. New routes were found. New partnerships formed. The Apache woman took on more responsibility, helping manage supplies and schedules. She did not ask for the role. It grew naturally from trust. The cowboy noticed how the ranch ran smoother with her steady presence. One evening, as they reviewed the day's work, he said, "You've changed this place." She shook her head. "The place changed because it was allowed to." He smiled slightly at that. As time passed, her small house near the fence began to feel truly like home. She planted a small garden beside it, using seeds shared by another worker. Watching the first green shoots rise from the soil filled her with quiet pride. Growth, she knew, came from patience. She began sending for her children. The decision was not rushed. She wanted to be sure. When they finally arrived, shy and unsure, the ranch welcomed them in small, meaningful ways. A shared meal, a safe place to sleep, work suited to their age. Watching them laugh freely for the first time in a long while, the Apache woman felt something settle deep inside her. This was what she had been working toward all along. The ranch hands noticed the change too. The land felt fuller now, not just with activity but with purpose. Disagreements still happened, work was still hard, but fairness had become part of the daily rhythm. One afternoon, a visitor arrived unexpectedly. It was the supply driver who had once questioned her presence. This time, his tone was different. He spoke politely, focused on business. When he left, he nodded at her with respect. She watched him go, knowing that change did not always come with apologies. Sometimes it came with quiet acceptance. As the season drew to a close, the ranch stood strong. Not untouched by hardship, but shaped by it. The cowboy looked over the land one evening, the sky painted with the colors of sunset. The Apache woman stood beside him, her children nearby. "I made the right choice," he said quietly. She looked at the land, then at her children. "So did I." They did not speak again. They did not need to. The truth was visible in the fences that held, the animals that thrived, and the people who worked together without fear. The story did not end with celebration or praise. It ended the way real stories do, with steady days, earned trust, and a future built one honest choice at a time. And on that ranch, fairness did not arrive loudly. It stayed quietly, proving itself every single day.